So as we look into decarbonization, one of the key topics is the alternative fuels. And looking ahead to 2050, we are looking at zero emission alternative energy fuels, ammonia, hydrogen, methanol, biofuels. And this panel is going to discuss exactly about these alternative fuels. We are going to start the session with a presentation by Mr. Jesse Fahnestock. He is the project director from Getting to Zero Coalition of the Global Maritime Forum. So Jesse is going to give us an overview of what is happening in this space, and then we will proceed with the panel discussion. Jesse, thank you very much for accepting to do this presentation. I see that you have a very interesting study recently published, so we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you for inviting me to participate. It's an absolute pleasure. As you said, I hope that my presentation will serve as a relevant introduction. It's very much at the macro overview level, as you said, and I understand that the panelists will be able to provide a lot more detail and more nuance to the topics we're going to discuss today than I will. But hopefully this will be a useful overview. As Nicholas said, I'm a project director at the Global Maritime Forum, and I'm here to present the findings from the second edition of our mapping of zero emission pilot and demonstration projects, which we do with the Getting to Zero Coalition. Getting to Zero Coalition, I hope many of you will know, we're a collaborative initiative between the Global Maritime Forum, the World Economic Forum, and Friends of Ocean Action. We launched in 2018, and we've currently got more than 140 organizations participating from the whole maritime value chain and from a number of industries relevant to zero emission shipping. The ambition of the coalition is to make zero emission vessels commercially viable by 2030. Put briefly. In order to do that, we look at a number of different aspects in our work with our member companies. One of those thematic areas is what we call motivating first movers. And that's the area where we look at the innovation questions, where we look at pilot and demonstration projects, and we look at the enabling factors, the enabling environment for getting these early action projects in place and creating momentum towards the 2030 goal. This mapping, as I mentioned, is actually the second edition of a study that was first released in 2020. In the first edition we included 66 projects, and this second edition includes 106 projects. And since then, we've begun work on the third edition, and we have even more. So it's a bit of a living study. The projects cover the full value chain relevant to zero emission shipping. So we're looking at ship technologies, we're looking at fuel production and bunkering and recharging systems as well. We try and do a little analysis on the projects that we find, categorizing them in terms of where they are, what geographies they cover, what the technological or fuel focus is, what type of project it is in terms of whether it's a concept study or a pilot or a demonstration in regular operations. And also looking at whether or not it's receiving public funding. I think I should say before we start that we don't make any claim to having done a comprehensive mapping. We know there are a lot of projects out there that we haven't been able to capture, but as you see from the increasing number, we think we're improving the coverage over time, and we really welcome input from the industry at large in terms of making this a more complete and useful study. So zooming out at the big picture, at the global picture here, we can see from the study that the center of gravity for innovation in zero emission shipping remains Europe. A little more than 2/3 of the projects included in the mapping are based in Europe, with a few countries, Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Belgium, all having more than 10 projects included. That said, there's been a significant increase in the number of projects based in Asia in this edition compared to the first edition. Part of that is improvements in our methods, and we've gotten better at searching for projects. But we also think it reflects a boom in activity in Asia. I'm sure you'll all be aware of that. Actually, it seems definitely to be happening. If we want to take a look at some of the emerging trends that are visible in the study, one thing we can see is that for what we call large ship projects, there's an increase in the uptake of ammonia as a fuel focus. 4 new large demonstration projects added since the first study. Ammonia and methanol both remain very important in this space, but we've had a significant uptick in the post-2020 project environment. We're also seeing a bit of specialization, so that the small ship projects are moving more and more towards hydrogen and battery power, and frequently a combination of the two for onboard energy. This seems to be crystallizing over time, just like the focus on hydrogen-based fuels is becoming stronger in the large ships. Just to look at this sort of split between Asia and Europe, where between them that represents most of the projects in the study, although we had a few projects in other regions. About 80% of the projects in Asia, perhaps unsurprisingly, are focused on vessel technology, given the strong shipbuilding industry in East Asian countries. That's perhaps not a surprise. And comparatively speaking, about 60% of the projects we included were ship-centric in Europe. Among the Asian projects, ammonia was the most common fuel focus, and indeed, more than half of the ammonia-centric projects that are included in the mapping were based in Asia. Looking at the fuel production side, we see a continuing trend towards hydrogen-based fuels, largely sort of power-to-X fuels, ammonia, methanol, hydrogen, and a little bit more static on the biofuels front. This has something to do with our methodology in terms of what we define as a pilot or demonstration project. Many biofuels are already mature technologies, of course, but we do think that the industry is leaning in this direction, and at least on the innovation project side, putting its focus here. In terms of the projects themselves, what do we see that's happening with them? Well, between the two studies, in the 6 months between the two studies, we saw a significant number of studies that moved on to a new phase. So studies that we included in the first edition that actually went on to a new phase, scaling up, increasing scope, broader participation of partners, or increasing the size, or moving to a more mature phase where a concept study might become a pilot or a demonstration. We think this is a very positive sign that these efforts are not ending up on a shelf or stuck in a lab somewhere, and we expect to see this trend continuing. In terms of funding of these projects, a little more than half of the projects have received some direct public funding, the majority of this originating in Europe. This, of course, reflects also the different approaches in different geographies. In many countries, state-owned firms are involved, so there may be some implicit public funding there, but not a publicly revealed grant of the kind that might be common in Europe. The largest awards of public funding are going to large-scale fuel production projects, and again, that probably is no surprise given the capital intensity of those projects. What are we going to do next? I already mentioned that we're going to be moving to a third edition, but we released this second edition in March. One of the main differences this time around as compared to the first was that we've made all of the data publicly available. So it's all available for download via the website of the Global Maritime Forum. Originally, we had produced the study for the Getting to Zero Coalition and only distributed it to our member companies, but now we've made it publicly available, and we hope that both the industry and policymakers will be able to draw on the work to identify areas of strength or areas of weakness, places where more work needs to be done, and potentially linkages between projects as well. As I mentioned, we're continuing to update, and we're hoping to also deepen the analysis so that the next edition, which we want to have out before the end of 2021, may include additional information about these projects, for example, around their findings, to the extent that we can include publicly available findings for these projects. That's all from me. I hope this provided a useful introduction, and I am really looking forward to the panel discussion to hear what some of the companies we've covered in this mapping are doing more specifically in this area.
Sverre, thank you very much for giving us this broad background. It really sets the landscape for the discussion that will follow. So again, thank you very, very much for opening this session. And now we'll kindly ask the panelists to join us. I will thank all of you for joining us, Berit, Claire, Jens, Mark, and of course, Sverre, and I will turn it over to Sverre, Bjørn, Svenning from Fearnleys, who is going to moderate this panel. It's a very high-level panel with executives who are very active right now in this project, who have voted with their dollars and with their strategy. So I'm particularly keen to this discussion. And thank you very much. Sverre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to moderate this panel. It's sort of a daunting task, but I'm jumping into it. And thank you for Jesse for your presentation, which was very interesting. And I think the type of work and the type of the report you refer to is very important, mapping and source for enabling, players in this industry to make informed decisions. So let me introduce the panelists. It's Miss Berit Hinnemann, who is Senior Innovation Project Manager with AP Møller Maersk. She works with decarbonization. I'll try to keep these presentations quite short. Next, we have Miss Claire Wright, who is a Business Economics Manager for Shell International, also deeply involved with decarbonization. Mr. Mark Cameron, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Ardmore Shipping, who has a long experience in operations and the technical side of the business. And I'm sure he has some quite interesting things to tell about their activities. Mr. Per Brinkmann, Vice President Special Projects in Will Wilhelmsen Holding here in Oslo, and working very much on their hydrogen projects and efforts. And finally, Mr. Jens Ismar, who is a board member of Exmar, Executive Director Shipping in Exmar in Belgium, and has a long experience in shipping from both Norway and abroad. Now, the challenge discussing alternative fuels, or alternative fuels in the sense of decarbonized fuels or carbon zero fuels, is that for the time, or for right now, there are no alternative fuels available in the quantities required by shipping, whether it's local cabotage or it's international shipping. But the key, or a key to all decarbonized fuels, is of course green or blue hydrogen, and how you are using the hydrogen as fuel, whether it's pure hydrogen, whether it's through a hydrogen carrier that is combusted, or even if it's a hydrogen carrier that is processed to yield hydrogen as fuel. There are concrete initiatives and projects ongoing among the panelists. Amongst others, Will Wilhelmsen and Ardmore are seeking the hydrogen path, so to say. So I think I'll leave the word to Mark and speak a little bit about what Ardmore is doing and their initiatives.
Great, thanks. Hopefully I'm off mute, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks, Sverre, for that introduction. Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, the way we choose to view this is that the time for sort of wait and see is now entering the phase of do and act. And by that, we mean that whilst it's true that you say that, the volumes of fuel that are required for shipping are not currently available in the broad markets, fuel is available, alternative fuels are available. And the view that we've taken is to start smaller. And we understand that many of the big representations here will have a view that the propulsive argument is the real main argument to solve the problem that we're talking about. our view is that by starting smaller and looking at generators, you're able to really start the impetus that will encourage others to change. Our view is that every ship is fitted with generators, and each ship has a very different characteristic for the amount of fuel that's drawn on board for that. And by using a technology that is based on methanol, and as you quite rightly said, using methanol as the hydrogen carrier, you're able to generate electricity with significantly reduced emissions today. And one of the great benefits, of course, is that water carries hydrogen as well. So by combining methanol with water, you've got a greatly enhanced source of hydrogen that's able to be used in a fuel cell. Now, I'm not saying that we're here to solve everyone's immediate problem. But what I am saying is that technology is available, methanol is available, and water is available. So we don't choose to take the argument anymore that wait and see is really the only option that's out there. The change is beginning, and there's an enormous amount of active interest in that respect. So.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to Per and Wilhelmsen. I mean, also focusing on hydrogen as fuel, but taking a more direct path using hydrogen for combustion. Can you comment on your activities, Per, please?
Thank you, Sverre, and thank you all for allowing me to share some experience and ideas. Just a few words about the history here. We are a deep sea shipping company. We've been around for 160 years. We've been through all these transitions of fuels and technology from the sailing ships to coal to oil, and then now into zero emission shipping. And there are some historical facts that we can address in this. There's is always a question, a lot of pros and cons in these shifts about technology, safety, and all this stuff. But the big picture is that it's all enabled by technology, but it's driven by economy. You can't come along with this shift without the economy. And it's all started in the short sea areas and then developed into deep sea after many years. And it took anything from 15 to 50 years to make this shift. Now, if you look at today's situation, we as a deep sea shipping company would not be able to take this on board the big ships at first. So we have quite in a new way, Wilhelmsen has been looking into the short sea market to get this started. And we are engaged in different projects related to different fuels, liquid hydrogen, compressed hydrogen, and LOHC. So more concrete, a project called Topeka is about 2 ro-ro vessels to be built and be fueled by liquid hydrogen, operating on the west coast of Norway. And we've got funds from the Norwegian government and from the EU to run this project. And right now we are in the process of doing the design, looking at all the factors going into the project, but of course also looking at the business case where we have a cargo, because this is not a research and development project. This is a commercial operating vessel to be handling cargo for the offshore industry primarily. And we, by going through this, we learn a lot. I think there are very many people out in the shipping community take things for granted, but it's not. It's a lot of small issues that needs to be clarified and to be handled to be able to start building and operating and actually commercially operate a vessel with this kind of fuel. And by doing this exercise also, we besides learning a lot, of course, we can also see that what directions we're moving into. Should it be combustion? Could it be fuel cells? Should it be this way of bunkering, and so forth? And we don't have the answers, but we are in a very, we have a steady pace and a good momentum in this, and we are actually very keen to start operating these vessels in about 2.5 years.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to move on to you, Berit, because my impression is that Maersk is so to say, fuel agnostic, but I've heard yourself in the past talking about the various options. I'd appreciate if you could tell a little bit about the rationale behind how you develop your decarbonization activities.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for having me on the panel. So yeah, decarbonization is a huge challenge in front of us, and in terms for Maersk, that means decarbonizing our more than 700 container vessels and also a yearly fuel consumption of 10 million tons of fuel oil each year. In the end of 2018, we announced our goal of being carbon neutral in 2050, and at that time it was a bit of a moonshot. But today we think that's possible, and we pursue several pathways to do it based on our analysis and based on a lot of work done by many to see what is feasible for container shipping and also what offers a path for carbon neutrality. Today we already use biofuels in our fleet, and we sell carbon neutral transportation, our eco-delivery product. We will continue to do that, but we do see scalability issues there, and therefore we also do pursue other fuels. For methanol, the technical feasibility is already there, since there are methanol vessels operating, vessels operating on methanol as a fuel out there. There is no green methanol available at large quantities, but there is potential for the development of that. So this is something that we are pursuing. And we also pursue ammonia, where the scalability potential is very interesting, but where today the technical feasibility for the vessel is not yet there. So this is, I mean, we don't believe that there is a silver bullet solution. And this is also why we pursue different pathways to see what can bring us towards carbon neutrality. And also, I also agree very much with, I think it was Mark who said it, that, I mean, it is also time to act and to start doing something. And what we are doing and have recently announced is that we are building a carbon neutral feeder vessel that will go into operation in 2023. That vessel will be dual fuel for methanol and fuel oil, but we plan to fuel it on either biomethanol or e-methanol from the start to also kickstart the development of green fuels. Because I think we have been talking a lot about the chicken and the egg problem and who does what first. And by actually starting to do something, I think this is the way of breaking this chicken and egg situation, so that change is actually starting to happen.
Thank you. And picking up on one of the fuels you mentioned, namely ammonia, and which from the report presented by Jesse, I mean, ammonia is so to say heralded as the future decarbonized fuel for shipping. I mean, we could say a lot of things about pricing, alternative fuel supplies, etc. But I would like to bring up the question about ammonia to you, Jens, because Exmar is a big gas carrier owner and operator, and the safety issues surrounding ammonia is something that I feel has been toned down in relation to all the benefits of using ammonia. What do you think, Jens, about ammonia as fuel and the safety issues?
You know, we are unfortunate in this situation to reach a decarbonization, that we are a gas carrier company, and that gas is obviously one of the solutions to reach this goal. And ammonia as the carrier or a hydrogen carrier is what we believe is one alternative solution going forward. Of course, it is not there today because MAN has not does not have the engine ready. They claim they will have it second half 24. But you know, we have made a study together with Lloyd's and on the ammonia supply system, and And we have an approval in principle together with Wärtsilä and Lloyds, and we believe that the safety issues can be handled. I mean, we carry a few million tons of ammonia every day, so we know how to handle it. And the safety issues we've been handling for 30 years. So you know, the safety issues we don't think is a major issue. Of course, it's toxic. You need to be very careful handling ammonia in the engine room, but with double vault piping systems, we believe this should be a non-issue with all the experience we have. And you know, we are working with the flag to get these approvals, which is of course one of the hurdles. So ammonia we believe in. We don't think it's going to be solve all the issues, because there are some challenges. First of all, it has to be green or blue. And secondly, there is a pricing issue combined with the fact that the calorific value of ammonia is very low. So you need twice the volume to push the vessels through the water. So we believe in ammonia as a solution for some of our vessels, some of our customers, but we also see some major challenges to make it the solution for all these deep sea shipping.
Thank you. And moving on to Claire, sort of representing one of the big oil companies. Please tell us a little about what you're doing and where your focus is right now, please.
Thank you, Sverre. Yes, I think in Shell we wear two hats. One is that, as you alluded to, we are a fuel supplier and we're helping our customers decarbonize. We are also the second largest charterer in the world. So when we look at decarbonizing shipping, we're looking at it through both lenses, because we do have our own fleet that we need to decarbonize. And in my answer, I'll respond to some things that Mark, Per, Jens and Berit all said. So when we're looking at it, we look at the cost that Per referred to. We're looking at what are other industrial sectors looking at that we can build upon for shipping. How can shipping leverage the infrastructure that is being developed for other sectors? Because one thing I think is clear is that shipping cannot absorb all of the cost of the transition. So when we look at, and Jesse referred to this in terms of those production projects, that there's a lot of focus on hydrogen. And certainly when we look at the other sectors that we supply fuel for, like heavy industry, power, heavy duty road, we see a lot of hydrogen projects in those sectors. And therefore we do see the potential for hydrogen to be used in shipping. I think it was Jens referred to the issue of efficiency. So when we look at it, we're also looking at how do we use some of these lower energy density fuels in shipping, and therefore we have a big focus on efficiency, because to use these fuels we will need ships to be much more efficient than they are today to deal with that volumetric issue. We're also looking at safety. How do we make sure that fuels are safe and available in a marine environment?
I hear you now. You seem to have frozen. Can anybody else hear me?
We can hear Claire fine. Sverre, I think you're a little broken, but we can hear Claire fine.
That's a relief. So we're looking at both the work that we need to do today to reduce shipping's emissions today. And so last month we ordered 10 LNG fueled VLCCs, and we're installing energy efficient technologies like air lubrication, for example, on our latest series of LNG carriers. We're also doing the R&D for future fuels. And this is where Berit referred to the chicken and the egg. And this is where we see the potential of fuel cells to overcome that issue, to enable a ship to transition with multiple fuels and not have to wait for the production and the supply of new fuels to be put in place globally that will help overcome some of those issues. So we're also working on a fuel cell trial on a deep sea ship. Sverre, are you with us?
I think Sverre might have fallen off there, but I think what you're saying there, Claire, makes a lot of sense, and I certainly agree with you about additional technology. And I think it's really important that we all understand there's space for any kind of energy saving device in a future world. So it's not only about future fuel, it's about reducing the need to burn as much fuel in any capacity. And that's where the broader technology interests are really welcome in this future environment.
Sorry, everybody. Claire froze on my screen here, and suddenly everything was lost. So I managed luckily to get back in again. So thank you for that. One thing is, I mean, some technology is not really mature for, but if you were to contract a new building today, what would you go for? What would you, I mean, what options are there? What we've seen so far this year, I mean, contracting hasn't been brisk for the first quarter of 2021. But we see that half the large tankers ordered, more than half the large container ships ordered, are all ordered with dual fuel LNG engines. But what should one opt for today if you were to, if you had to place a new building order? And what do you think, Mark?
I think it is a difficult question, and I don't underestimate the enormity of it. And I think, you know, let's all be honest. At any point when someone's ordering a ship today, there needs to be a real need for ordering a ship. And I think, you know, we have a history of not necessarily defining and understanding the need, and rather just going out and being motivated by price and slot availability than what the industry actually needs. So overcapacity is our biggest enemy. So let's put new buildings in that light. I think, though, at the end of the day, for us, we're very interested in the methanol main engine power source combined with a methanol fuel cell reformer. We think that that's where the real immediate opportunity lies. Now, a reciprocating engine today still requires a pilot fuel. So a methanol engine is not just purely a methanol engine, it is also methanol with some type of gas oil injection into it. So it is still in its development. It's not the final product, but it is a significant improvement over what you would traditionally see in just burning a pure diesel. And this is why I come back to looking at it holistically and making sure that you do understand that typically 20 to 25% of your fuel burn is on your generator. So take that into consideration when you're building a new ship as well, and look at the opportunity with any kind of opportunity to look at some of the more variable components here. And that's why I'm saying that if you are building a new ship today with a methanol reciprocating main engine, that has the great potential to power your electrical source by using the same fuel type on board a ship and having less need to carry multiple fuel sources.
Right, yes. I mean, if you listen to the two big engine makers, I mean, yes, both of them are racing ahead now to develop the ammonia fueled engine. But in the portfolio, they already got, I mean, methanol, they have LPG, they have LNG, as well as, of course, fuel oil and so forth. And my impression is that their goal is, I mean, the end goal is not the ammonia fueled engine, it's a fuel flexible engine, which can run on any single fuel or any mix of fuels. But then again, I mean, I think there's hardly a ship owner that would like to have a dozen different types of tanks on board for the various types of fuels. But and are there any of the other panelists that would like to express views on what to go for in a new building today? Is it matters of keeping doors open?
Sverre, I think, first of all, the good news with this uncertainty that we're talking about is that less ships will be ordered. So that gives us a hope that we can have some good markets in the years to come. So that's a bit of a side remark, but I think, the only tangible solution you have today is, apart from methanol, is LPG or LNG. And that's what you see, that I think the 170 ships are on order now with dual fuel, with LPG or LNG. So the rest is more I wouldn't say dreams, but there are certainly uncertainties related to it when it comes to feasibility and so on. And of course, there are also choices with shaft generators, whether there is going to be cold ironing to avoid the emissions in port. So, and as Mark said, there are multiple solutions here, and that's why it's a difficult choice what to build, and when you look at all the options today.
Right. No, I fully agree. Berit?
Yes, I would also like to comment on what we are doing, since we've recently announced that all our future owned new builds, that they will be dual fuel for operation on a carbon neutral fuel and for operation on fuel oil. And we start by implementing methanol, because that is the solution that is there. And there we are also planning to use green methanol. So that's actually an opportunity to go to a carbon neutral solution and start making impact in terms of CO2 reductions. Further down the line, we also see ammonia once, as it was mentioned several times also by other speakers, once the technical feasibility is there, and this can be handled in a safe manner. But we think it's we go to carbon neutral solutions right away, and this is exactly what we're doing with methanol now. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
If I may, I think it's where your intention of operation with that would be a very much question now. How will we develop the regulations in this field? We seem to talk about carbon neutral as this is a defined product, and that this is going to happen in the deep sea. So far I have not been able to identify any concrete proposal on how IMO shall be able to issue regulations and enforce regulations containing the history of the fuel. And that means that I think in regional operations you can have your fully carbon neutral fuel bringing carbon on board, but in the deep sea for many years to come you will be allowed to burn fuel, or you will not be able to certify the fuel history. I would just give you a very brief example. I took the list in Transparency International. They have a corruption perception ranking going on. And if you take the 70 on the bottom of that list, they are major providers of fuel and bunkering ports in the world. And I ask, how can we in the future, in the near future, establish a system where you go bunkering in one of those countries and you come to Europe or US or wherever, and you show with them a certificate that you bought on the pier in one of these ports, and tell the world that this is a carbon neutral fuel, when you can't identify that fuel being green if it comes from this or that source. So I think the solution on the short term is to look at fuels that don't have carbon on board, so that any emissions from the vessel itself is neutral or zero. And from the technical side, I think at least in some operations, I would go for a PTO, PTI solution where I connect the main engine. You could go deep sea main engine on MGO, but you can also have a grid on board where you can connect and use the PTO, PTI system to be able to run on electricity, or you can produce electricity and batteries. And when time allows, you can put on board other sources of energy to connect. That could be a solution in that respect.
Interesting. Berit?
Yeah, I would like to make some comments, and I think it's very interesting what you said there. I think one way or the other, I mean, life cycle analysis will be a key. I can see what is attractive about a fuel where no CO2 comes out of the exhaust, but it is important to account for upstream CO2 emissions to see whether on the whole life cycle this fuel actually has a benefit to general greenhouse gas emissions or not. So it needs to be a well-to-wake life cycle analysis, and also it needs to include all the greenhouse gases in it.
I fully agree, but I don't see the tools that you have in the international deep sea shipping. That's my point. I don't see how you can enforce it, how you're really going there. And that's my concern, is that we take it for granted, but we don't have the tools. And if the early discussions in IMO on this subject, IMO took the stand that the history of the fuel has to be handled by the production country. That's a part of the Paris Agreement for each country producing the fuel, but the shipping would have to consider the emissions from the ship itself. Now we're into a discussion which is very demanding when it comes to legal and the organization, how to handle it. So I personally think that any levy of a significant size that can really collect money to support this ship, that would be a great help. But even so, that's also the challenge for the organization to really establish a system that can be reliable and safe.
Thank you. I mean, several of you have touched upon biofuels and already using biofuels, and we from where we're sitting that several owners are actually blending in 5, 10, 15, even 10% biofuels in the fuel composition. But we also got synfuels, and of course, ammonia is a synthesized fuel. An alternative to synthesize the hydrogen with nitrogen is to combine it with CO2 and either produce methanol or methane, synthetic methane. And of course, when it comes to methane, the big thing today is methane slip. From well to wake, concentrating on from the tank to wake, it seems that it's something that could be handled quite well. The MAN methane slip is very low, and winter two gas and diesel with the second generation engines are cutting slip as considerably. So without focusing on what's happening on board, I mean, it's the well to tank slip that is important. And of course, if you introduce synthetic methane, it's possible to control it quite well. But using synthetic methane rather than ammonia, I mean, we have an infrastructure in place. We have all the financial products. We could have green certificates, etc., etc. Wouldn't it be more an easier way to decarbonize by going for synthetic methane rather than ammonia? Are there any viewpoints on that, please?
I think maybe just I'll comment. I think with all of the fuels, there are technological hurdles to be overcome, and it's the case with the synthetic fuels as well, to make sure that on a well-to-wake basis, they are zero. And my understanding, certainly for some of the synthetic fuels, is they will require either carbon capture on the vessel, because in burning the fuel, they are not zero, or they will require direct air capture to be able to enable them to be well-to-wake zero. But I know that there are projects looking at some of those, and I think that's the important thing in the shipping industry at the moment, which Jesse referred to at the beginning, is that the number of projects looking at the pathways to zero carbon fuels is increasing. And for us in our choices, the focus is on what can we do to reduce emissions today, and particularly energy efficiency and the use of LNG, where we are on a well-to-wake basis looking at how do we reduce the methane slip that you talked about, but also the R&D needed to deliver the zero carbon fuels and looking at across sectors to see what other sectors are doing that shipping can piggyback on.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to comment on this?
I think what you're probably hearing from all of us is that fortunately, we're not talking about winners and losers. We're all talking about solutions. And I think that's the kind of language that this needs, because this isn't a competitive environment. And of course, ultimately, there will be a cost attached to whatever fuel we use, and that will drive a bottom line profit. But at the end of the day, whatever people choose and whatever mechanism people choose to price that, others will follow on that path. So, and there will be different horses for different courses. And short sea shipping, as Per was referring to, will certainly lead the way in a very clear environment that will suit the short sea shipping industry. And that might be different in South America to what it is in the Baltic region. But that's okay. We're not intercompeting on that level. On the deep sea fleet, I think the liner trades will ultimately determine a lot of what the blue ocean fleet will start to use, because the liner trades will have the predictable volumes and they'll have the predictable locations that an infrastructure can be built around. For those of us who are in the tramping trades, we'll have to follow on that sort of trajectory. But we understand that, and we can already start to take views today on the basis of what that's going to look like.
The good thing here is that normally the ship owner are at the end of the stick when it comes to all these regulations and what is changing. But here, I think we're a little bit more, or we are actually more together with our customers, our charters, to find solutions, because we all have the same goal to reduce emissions, and the charters obviously need to pick up a major part of the bill. Otherwise, this will never work.
If I may, I fully agree. I think the shift comes with the end user or the cargo owners. We need to get them on board, and that's what we see in the project in Norway on whether it be the electric or hydrogen or ammonia projects. They're all driven by the cargo owners, and that's extremely important. Another issue is just to mention that what I think we will have to see is that there will be national and regional regulations being different from the global regulations. And that's something in deep sea we hate, but I think we have to realize that's the way it's going to be. And that's one way of making this shift starting. And then you can build infrastructure locally, and then you can gradually grow and take it into the deep sea, because we all want this to happen. And just a final word, I feel sometimes that the politicians are, in a way, they want to punish the shipping industry for being polluters. We are just a tool in the trade, or in the world trade. And I think it's very important that the industry itself is proactive and showing interest and have the ambition of really make this happen and assist politicians in a constructive way, so that we don't end up as we did with the sulfur discussions, with all ship owners against the regulators, because then we lose credibility. So we need to help finding the solutions and then guide the politicians to get the regulations right.
Thank you. I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in here, and I noticed also this morning in an interview in Danish shipping news, Shipping Watch, that Wärtsilä is writing off hydrogen as one of the future fuels. And the question is, Wärtsilä has told us that hydrogen will play a niche role as a fuel for the shipping industry in the future. What are your thoughts? Anybody that would like to
I think we're at the stage at the moment where we need to be looking for solutions. Obviously, different participants will have different strengths in the industry and therefore will do the research and development and the projects that fit with their strengths. We certainly do see a role for hydrogen in a deep sea environment. We also see, I noticed one of the questions was about fuel cells. We also see the potential for fuel cells in a deep sea environment. But that reflects the fact that obviously we are a deep sea operator of vessels, and therefore we are going to focus, and our customers are mainly deep sea operators of vessels, and therefore we will focus on the R&D where we have strengths. But as the report Jesse described at the beginning, there are a lot of projects and we need to see how they develop. But fundamentally, I think our view is that the future fuel of shipping is a hydrogen-based fuel, and efficiency is critically important. And we shouldn't ever forget that.
Right, thank you. I see that the time is running out now, so I think I'll just wrap this up. I mean, I think that one thing that I observed in the past 1 to 2 years, compared to let's say the sulfur cap that was introduced at the beginning of 2020, that the shipping industry was in total denial of the sulfur cap. Not everybody, not total, but I mean, generally speaking, in denial of the sulfur cap as late as in 2018. The difference now when it comes to decarbonization, which is also, I mean, definitely in the strategy of the IMO, is that this is taken seriously in all corners. And as the report presented at the beginning shows, I mean, there are so many initiatives, small and big, on various types of fuels, on various types of technology, and so on and so forth. And I believe that what you have told the audience now is that do all the small steps, do what you can, develop and innovate. I mean, it's research and innovation rather than research and development. There will be a price tag attached to this, that's for sure. And my impression is that what you're signaling is that own ship owners and charterers, cargo owners are in the same boat, and that there will be a cost pass-through that will finance this transition. And finally, there is no final solution here. There is not one single carbon zero fuel that will win this game, but we will see a mix varying between something used in the short sea trades, something used in the tramp trades, and something used in the liner trades. And we will see a mix of decarbonized fuels going forward. That was what I was going to sum up. I mean, I've still got a few minutes. If any one of you would like to add something to that, please raise your hand. Right, then I think I'll just say thank you to all for participating in this panel. And thank you to the audience as well, of course. And I'll leave the floor to you again, Nicholas.
Well, all I want to say is thank you. It has been a great session, very comprehensive, very insightful, very interesting topic for the industry right now. And thank you to all for sharing your insight. And Sverre, thank you for moderating the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.